Well, welcome back. Um, in today's session, I would like to maybe explore something that I came across during the festive break. I guess I should begin today's session by by acknowledging the festive break, and hope you all had you know a good Easter break and spent time with your loved ones, your friends, your families, or yourself. I I'd like to use today's conversation to address something that I came across over the last few days. For a start, I I have said before, and it is still the case, that I do not have and I do not own a television uh, at my house. I haven't had a TV for more than 10 years, and so in many ways I am, you might say, intelligently ignorant every single day. Um, you may have heard the saying, if you watch the news, you're misinformed, and if you do not watch the news, you're uninformed. In many ways, I have been, and I choose to remain uninformed on so many issues. However, as with most festive periods, you spend time with loved ones, you spend time with family, you spend time with friends, you go out, you socialize, you interact, you communicate and converse with those you care about. And it wasn't any different this time around. However, uh, I was able to watch two shows on Netflix, and I thought perhaps that what I my initial observation from the two shows was very interesting, but also connected very nicely with some of the conversations that I have had and that I have shared over the last few weeks. Um, I saw two shows. The first called Ultimatums, a show on Netflix based in the United States, and the second was called Love is Blind, also based in the United States and also on Netflix. And uh, I found both shows to be quite interesting. Uh, I intend to do perhaps two separate sessions, trying to extract uh, lessons, observations, and perhaps areas of improvement. Not about the show itself, but in how I communicate, but also how I address some of the topics I do. But I also think, most importantly, in how we all can make better decisions, especially relational decisions. In many ways, a lot of the conversations I have had over the last few weeks have focused on relationships. I have talked about the dating marketplace and the relationship marketplace. Now, these two shows on Netflix converged on the marriage marketplace. In both, you had people who were in the dating marketplace or who have been in the dating marketplace and who were looking to transcend or move into the relationship marketplace. Um, I have opined on the fact that both marketplaces are not the same. Both marketplaces do not require the same set of behaviors, actions, mindset, or attitude. The two shows illustrated to me that unfortunately most people believe that both are the same. And so you find people who are transitioning into the marriage marketplace behaving as though they're still in the dating marketplace, or I should say, using the same set of tools. And likewise, you have people who are in the dating marketplace who want to remain in the dating marketplace, but using the marriage marketplace tools uh, for the dating marketplace. And as you would imagine, and I wasn't shocked. Uh, Unfortunately, you do not get the same outcomes and the same set of results. What I like to do is perhaps give you a summary of what I observed and try and connect it back to the foundations of what I try to share. And perhaps I should reiterate uh, some of my tenets, because I think it's very important to understand um, what I'm trying to say, what I believe in, and why. In many ways, one of the things I took out from watching those two dating shows was that I was going to double down on some of the things that I have been sharing and some of the topics I've been talking about. I have been trying to soften some of the things I talk about to make it more acceptable, to make it more accepting to people. However, what I found from watching the two dating shows was that the fact that I do not have a television, or I do not follow uh, the media industry, I don't have Netflix, I don't have Amazon Prime, I don't have, I'm not on any social media sites with the exception of YouTube. Uh, it made me understand how perhaps I was not aware of how things had um, progressed. And by saying the word progress, I'm not putting that in it's not a positive, I'm not using it in a positive light. Um, the right word should be regressed. In any case, most people's, so one person's poison is another person's pint. And so it's not for me to say. But in any case, I feel that generally speaking, it's quite bleak in my perspective, in the expectations of society on particularly young people and why we are getting things wrong. I got to understand in many ways why the major decisions of our lives are constantly being made very poorly. And let me use a good example. Human beings are very, very unique. If you contrast a human being to his closest, you might call it mammal, but also the greater, wider animal kingdom, what you find is a huge difference between a human being and other animals, other mammals. We are the highest of creation, so we are told. Unlike the animals that use instinct and the genetic code, we have a mind. We have the ability to choose. Interestingly, we have a faculty, intellectual faculties, perception, memory, imagination, reason, and all of those faculties enable us to make and interpret and generate emotions, therefore making better decisions compared to animals. A tree can only grow where it's planted. An animal operating on instincts and the genetic code can only do so much. Human beings, on the other hand, have this uncanny ability to decide at any day to create a vision, to pursue that vision, and against all odds, to bring that vision to reality. Incredible. And we do that a lot based on our imagination. Now, with your imagination, you can pre-play the future. You can create a picture of the future and you can pre-play that future in your mind to give you inspiration, to give you motivation, to give you a sense of direction, to give you discipline, and in many ways, to keep your motivation going. With your memory, you can replay the past. And if you do that rightly, you can draw on self-confidence. You can remind yourself of overcoming odds during difficult times. You can remind yourself of things you've done well. You can also use that memory to remind yourself of things that are not right in your life, you can use that memory to act as an obstacle to progress, because you constantly remind yourself of how poor you are in everything you do, whether that be correct or false. And so, knowing how to replay or pre-play the future or the past, and how to use the imagination and how to use your intellectual faculties is something that has to be taught. It's not something that comes genetically. We have to be taught how the mind works. And so whilst watching these two shows, what dawned on me was how much we have failed as parents, and how much we are failing the younger generation as parents, or as people who are older than the younger generation. I start with the first, which is Ultimatum, the show Ultimatum. And what you had were a number of people who paired up, came into a show, and with their significant others, and one of them was issuing an ultimatum: marry me within the next few months, 2 months, 3 months, or marry me, or I'll move on to someone else. Have a baby with me so we can start a family, or I'm moving on to someone else. And on the other side, you had someone who was not quite sure about where they were in life and whether they were ready for that big decision: getting married, starting a family, moving in together. And the whole essence of the show was to see if they could take two people who were couples, put them amongst other couples, swap, allow them to choose who they would like to be paired with for a period of 3 weeks, recognizing that in principle they were opening up themselves, but physically, emotionally, mentally, to be with this new person, and you were meant to live with them as a couple, meaning there were no restrictions. The whole point being that at the end of the period, the person who had been issued an ultimatum and the person who issued the ultimatum would have some clarity on, firstly, whether the ultimatum had to be accepted, or whether the ultimatum was necessary, and thirdly, whether the person that they came into the show with was the right person. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking that this sounds very, very fascinating, and it is, and it was. And as you can imagine, there were different outcomes from the different couples. I have no intentions of going into that in great detail in today's session, but I have said in one of the prior sessions, I think this is a very, very important statement to make. I never issue ultimatums. I have found ultimatums to be the wrong approach to dealing with your intrapersonal and interpersonal relationships. Relationships that you have with yourself and relationships you have with other people. I found ultimatums to be a loss leader for many reasons, but primarily the most important being when you issue someone an ultimatum, if they accept or if they succumb to that ultimatum, what you create is a hostage. Effectively, you create a prisoner. Whether the person makes the decision happily, or makes a decision out of duress, or makes a decision out of fear. Now, recognize that any decision we make using any of the negative emotions seldom works. Any decision we make from a place of lack, fear, sadness, anger, often turn out to be poor decisions in the long run. This does not mean that all decisions made using a positive emotion turns out to be good decisions. The point being that the potency of an emotion can be so strong, the sense of loss can be so powerful, that people make decisions because they believe that they have no other option. And the way life works is you may not have options today because of where you are. But in 6 years, you might have a lot more options. And what tends to happen is when people are put under so much pressure, whether that be a man or a woman, to do something that they're not ready to do yet, if the person asking for the ultimatum or who has put forward the ultimatum is not careful, what you create is a hostage. You create someone who is a prisoner to you. And what do we do when we become prisoners? We always seek to liberate ourselves. We always seek freedom. My approach has always been to say what I want from a relationship, to say what I'm happy to accept, to be very honest, to be very direct, and to be very, very frank. To put my honest thoughts on the table, making allowances for some form of meaningful disagreements between both parties, making the allowance for the person to state their honest thoughts as well. And once we both have placed our thoughts on the table, to allow for some discussion, not with the intention of finding a compromise, but with the intention of allowing both parties to be very, very honest and not to feel that they'll be condemned for not choosing a path. And so watching the episode of Ultimatum, one of the things I observed was, number one, ultimatums never work. They disguise themselves as a solution in the short term. In the long term, they always fail. They always fail. Because we're human beings. We're not meant to lord of other people. We're not meant to be masters. We're meant to be masters of our own destiny, of our own purpose, but we're not meant to be masters of other people. And therefore, an ultimatum creates a relationship whereby one person has placed the other person in chains. Some ultimatums are made very, very directly, and some are made very slowly. In any case, it's important to recognize that if an ultimatum is issued in your relationship, the best advice I can always give people is to walk away. It's time to leave. It's time to move on. But more importantly, is before you leave, you might want to consider stating your most honest thoughts and wishes and dreams and vision. But recognize that once an ultimatum is issued, even though the ultimatum is taken back, the person's true intentions has been made known. So usually it's best to just move on. And this is why I have sought in all of my relationships and all of my interactions with people to be very honest with people. Tell people where you are. Tell them where they've met you. Tell them why you're where you are. Tell them where you intend to go. And tell them that if your vision is not consistent with their vision, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Both of you can hold on to your visions. Until you find that there is an alignment in that vision. Because if you have two visions, you have a division. And my experience has been one of the things that causes relationships to fail the most is expectation. Unfortunately, wherever there are expectations, undue expectations, unnecessary expectations, very high expectations, you will have disappointments. That always happens. Someone once said to me that the most important quality to have in any relationship is low expectations, because that way you cannot be disappointed. Wherever there are expectations, there will always be disappointments. Wherever there are disappointments, there will be disagreements. Disagreements always leads to some form of discord, leading to the deletion. You delete a relationship. Division, you split a relationship. or destruction. You get rid of a relationship. Wherever you have division, destruction, or discord, it always creates a scenario whereby two visions are split, and it's very hard to unite those two visions again. Which is why you should always start with two visions, but state what those visions are with the hope that you have the death of the two visions at some point and the birth of a united vision. You don't keep both visions. You never keep both visions. If you're transitioning from the relationship marketplace to the marriage marketplace, the institution of marriage and the framework of being married requires the death of two people and the birth of a new union. And therefore, expectations always create disappointments. And this is what was interesting but yet sad about watching the Ultimatum show. Obviously, they had a long period of filming, and they finished filming, and it came to an end, and they brought back the participants to the show. And here was what was fascinating. This is season 1. As I looked and as I listened, and as we looked at what happened in the prior sessions, and what occurred to me was how important it is for men, particularly, to have an understanding of their manhood and who they are, but also how important it is for women to be made aware of their womanhood and who they are. Now, that said, let me move to the second show, which is Love is Blind. In my opinion, perhaps a much more interesting show, because it provides more of an insight into relational psychology and how some of the things we do not do should be done. Now, let me create a scene. Again, I will not go into the detail of each of these, but in Love is Blind, what you have is perhaps I think about a dozen or just under a dozen men and a dozen women who are dating. But you date without seeing the person. You meet and you converse, and you only see the person. You don't even see, you only hear the person speak. You don't see the photograph of the person, so you do not know who you are dating. You get to connect with the person, and at the end of the show, you propose. You propose marriage. You listen to a number of people, you choose who you connect with, and finally you propose. If they say yes, boom, you get married. Now, the fascinating part of this different show is it illustrates how the dating marketplace should be done. I have said before that we make a lot of mistake because we date with the marriage intention too soon during the dating process. And unfortunately, when we move into the marriage lifestyle, we start to act as though we're still in the dating lifestyle. In any case, one of the things I took out from Love is Blind is it's perfectly normal to have multiple connections with various people. I think this was something that was a bit of a struggle for most of the contestants. Between the age of 18 and 35 for men, you have 18 years to make some of the most important decisions you need to make in life. Between the age of 18 and 27 for women, in this case 18 to 27, beginning from 28, women have before them 10 years to make the most important decisions that they can make before they transition from the dating scene to the marriage scene. It's not unusual for you to find that you can actually be in love with multiple people. You can be in love with someone physically, you can be in love with someone mentally, and you can be in love with someone spiritually. For a very few number of people, it's hard to find someone that you find spiritually, mentally, physically attractive. Some have two, some have one, few have three. In any case, one of the things we do very poorly is we do not know how to date. At 18, we start dating. We go to college, we meet someone, we date. Now, when I use the word date, I'm talking about the process of actually, I'm using it differently to what I use when I talk about dating for men. I'm explaining this from a female perspective. Most women date relationally. So they date as though they are in the marriage marketplace. You meet someone, you fall in love with him, and you start dating him, and you date him from 18 to 24. You get married at 23, and unfortunately, by 25, 26, you're divorced. Why? You never got the opportunity to sow your wild oats. You didn't date a lot of people. I'm not saying have sex. I'm saying go on dates, meet people, interact with people, listen, commune, emotionally connect. Those who do that realize that it's perfectly normal to find multiple people attractive. It's not something to be ashamed of. The question is, what do you do with that attraction? And so in this program, Love is Blind, what I saw were people who were mature, from their early 20s to late 30s, really struggle with the reality of meeting two different people, not in person, but by listening to them and connecting with them emotionally, and falling in love with those two people. Now, from the female perspective, it was something that was very, very interesting. And it's a session I think I will do, which has to do with being someone's seconds. To put it very mildly, I want Jane, but I also like Martha. If I propose to Jane and she says no, then I choose Martha because I couldn't get Jane. But Jane was always my first choice. Unbeknownst to Martha, she thinks she's my first choice. She thinks that she's the one. She's just the second choice I have made. She's my second. Similarly, you have Mary dating two guys. One is Joseph and one is John. Joseph is her first choice. Joseph has no interest in her. She defaults back to John. John thinks he's the start. He thinks, I'm the one. She doesn't give John the gift of honesty in saying, my heart actually is with someone else. I'm dating you, but I'm happy to date you, but I want you to be aware of my position emotionally in this relationship as I walk into the relationship. So what tends to happen is you have deceit from the start. And the fascinating thing was how far people are willing to use deceit to achieve whatever goal they want. Which brings me back to one of the things I have said, that dating is the art of deceit. Anyone who does not understand that or frown to that concept needs to stop and think again. Dating is the art of deceit. Honesty in dating can be a liability because we've created a society whereby to be honest is perceived as almost unforgivable. If you're deceitful, if you tell white lies, and if you just bend the truth ever so slightly, just so it meets what the person expects, it sounds good, that is welcomed much more than being very honest. So what men have learned to do is tell white lies. And what women have been nurtured to do is not be honest. Both parties are playing the game of dishonesty. So I'm going to do a session on being someone's seconds, because no one should be in that position if you can. If you can avoid it, you want to avoid it. You want to feel that when you've made that decision to be with someone, the person, even if you are the person's seconds, the person has been very honest. And therefore, it's your choice to make as to whether you want to go ahead with that risk. Now, let me bring today's session to a close. And this is what I will do. I'm going to state my tenets again for the sake of the sessions I will do going forward, as I double down on some areas and on some topics. For men, now this show, this series, is for men. I speak for men, to men. I have no issues. I treat it more like a classroom. All men are not the same. I put you into 3 groups: preschool, undergraduate, and postgraduate. The first group, 18 years and below. The second group, 18 years up to 35, and the final group, 35 and above. The show is for men, the conversations are for men. Women are more than welcome. And I think a woman understanding how a man thinks can invert some of the advice I give men for her benefit. In any case, I have a tenet for men and I have a tenet for women. I basically speak to those in the 18 to 35 year group because that is perhaps the most significant, in my opinion, to me. And I say as follows. Number one, the most important part of what should be your future will come from the decisions you make between the age of 18 and 35, because that is when you become, 18 is when you become emancipated from your parents. You become an adult. You are responsible for your decisions, your actions. So, but you are still very vulnerable. Unfortunately, unlike the wildebeests and the animals, that when born, within 2 or 3 minutes, have to run with the pack. Have to run with the pack of lions, pack before the lions actually come and actually attack or kill them. You, on the other hand, you do not have that instinctive part of what is necessary to keep you alive. Hence, you stay with your parents till about 18, and then you're called an adult. You're asked to go forward and chart your course. Come back home if you